It's over for the Denver Broncos and Russell Wilson. Bottom of the division with only 3 wins out of 12, it's sad to say that the Denver Broncos are done for this season. But which factors contributed to such a demise? Who is to blame for the poor performances? The Denver Broncos are a team with a history of winning, but it wasn't the case this season as they lost 3/4 of their games. Now that may seem like a damning and disastrous fact, but the truth is, the Broncos have lost, for the most part, nail-biters. 10 out of their 12 games this season have ended with only a 7-point gap. Out of those 10 one-score games, they did lose 6 of them, and 3 of those losses were in overtime. Were they heartbreaking defeats? Well, naturally, given the close nature of the results, but what is even more gut-wrenching is the way that they lost those games. In Week 1 at Seattle, the Broncos missed a 64-yard game-winning kick at the death of the game, which resulted in the media questioning the strategy and competency of head coach Nathaniel Hackett. The rookie head coach had some clock management issues, where he took 43 seconds off the clock before calling a timeout, leaving his offense with only 20 seconds. Now, the decision obviously did cost the Broncos time and field position, as their kicker, whose history at kicking 60-plus yard field goals stood then at a success rate of 12.5%, and he was about to enter the field to kick the longest kick of his life. It was a head-scratching decision, but it was also at that moment when the whole world realized that the head coach didn't trust his quarterback Russell Wilson to make the play. Nathaniel Hackett trusted his kicker over his shiny new quarterback, which foreshadowed the doom for the Broncos this season. It's the crunch time decision that usually has a magnifying lens, and when head coach Hackett pulled Russell Wilson from the field, it signaled the potential end of his career as a head coach for this team. But it didn't turn out to be the case, as Nathaniel Hackett is still the man calling the shots. So, is upper management suggesting that their problem runs deeper than the head coach? Who would be to blame? Obviously, all eyes would be on the quarterback, since he's the one earning the most money. He's the one determining where the ball goes, the one making the plays, and shoulders to blame if things didn't turn out so well. In the offseason, the Seattle Seahawks agreed to trade Wilson to the Broncos in exchange for a haul of players and picks. The Broncos picked up Wilson and a draft pick, while the Seahawks picked up 5 selections and 3 active players, including a former first-round pick in tight end, Noah Fant. All to say that the Broncos did give up a lot for Wilson, who was 33 at the time of the trade and a Super Bowl champion. It was regarded as a genius move by GM George Patton, who knew that Denver needed a star quarterback, given the string of mediocre and inconsequential players placed in that position before Wilson's arrival. Last season, Teddy Bridgewater, who is the backup for the Miami Dolphins this season, was their starting quarterback for 14 games. And during 2020, it was Drew Lock, who held the mantle for 13 games. And the list of mediocre quarterbacks can be traced all the way back to Peyton Manning's final season in 2015, when he only featured in 9 games. The Broncos desperately wanted an A-grade top-shelf quarterback and paid the hefty price to get Russell Wilson in that Broncos jersey. But despite the 3-win record, did Russell Wilson play all that poorly? Were his performances the main reason for the team's demise? Let's have a look at his stats so far this season. Russell Wilson has played in 11 of the 12 games and has thrown the ball 358 times for a pass completion percentage of 60.1%. He's projected to throw the ball 507 times for the same pass completion percentage. Now, comparing those numbers with his final year in Seattle, Wilson, who only played 14 games and threw the ball 400 times for a pass completion percentage of 64.8%. Now, you might think that 4.8% is not that significant, but in the game of inches, well, it's a massive number. So let's go back to Wilson's numbers this season. He has thrown for 2,558 yards, which gives him an average of 213.16 yards per game. He is projected to have 3,624 yards to end the season, but what was he averaging last season? Well, Wilson finished the season with 3,113 yards and 222.4 rushing yards. So remember, that is in 14 games. Russell Wilson is set to complete 16. But what is the most damning stat of them all? The sucker punch that will drop you to the floor? Well, it's the touchdowns and interception numbers. Russell Wilson this year has 8 touchdowns and 5 interceptions, and is projected to finish the season with 11 touchdowns and 7 interceptions. So do those numbers reflect an elite top-shelf quarterback? Last season, Wilson finished the season with 25 touchdowns and 6 interceptions. Clearly, last season he was the better version of himself, and an argument can be made that it takes a while for someone to gel with his teammates and get to know the offensive system. Not only that, but Wilson is also the second most sacked quarterback in the NFL, receiving 37 rib-crunching takedowns. So you have the combination of a rookie head coach with a veteran quarterback who is just joining the team and who isn't getting the protection that he needs. So it would be foolish of you to neglect the inevitable pitfalls. But in fairness to GM George Paton, it's been a difficult season. But what additionally made things tougher on Paton and his Broncos team? Well, it has been the running game. Losing Javonte Williams, their sophomore running back, after 4 games took the wind out of their sails of this offense, which then scrambled to find a back who is dependable and who can open the passing game. Including the quarterbacks, the Broncos have used run schemes for 15 different players. They recently cut their number 2 running back, Melvin Gordon, due to his fumbling issues, where the back rushed for 90 times and 5 fumbles, which is just as much as Russell Wilson. Gordon did find the end zone twice, but his productivity was mediocre in comparison to another veteran on the team, Latavius Murray, who the Broncos signed to add depth once Williams was out for the season. Now, Murray in 7 games surpassed what Gordon achieved in 10 games in terms of yardage. Murray rushed 104 times for 405 yards, scoring 4 touchdowns. But most importantly, he has 0 fumbles. He's probably the best acquisition during the season by a GM who is drowning in abuse and hate from poor production from his signing of Russell Wilson. GM Paton showed that he was able to pivot from losing Javonte Williams, and let's face it, he was a huge loss for this team. Last season, Javonte was a time-sharing running back situation with Melvin Gordon and still had incredible numbers and looked amazing on the field. Williams rushed 203 times for 903 yards, scoring 4 touchdowns in his rookie season. He also had 43 receptions for 316 yards, scoring 3 touchdowns. So there is no doubt that he is someone the Broncos desperately miss. But with the chances of making the playoffs now over for the Broncos, who are the players who can make that leap and improve next season? Well, this might be stating the obvious, but Russell Wilson and his offensive line need to be on the same page. 37 sacks in 12 games is way too many, especially for a veteran quarterback who will prove to be less mobile as the seasons go by. With protection, Russell Wilson will improve at the position because he will have more time to find his open receivers, the likes of Courtland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy should they remain. Now equally, they need to get Javonte Williams back on the field because he is a difference maker. He is a young and explosive talent that will keep the defenses honest and will open the play-action pass play that can carve defenses open. That is the main strategy on offense, and really it's the only side of the ball that needs drastic work, because defensively, the Broncos have been outstanding this season, keeping their team within a chance to win in 10 out of their 12 games. So will Nathaniel Hackett be back next season to coach this team? Most people believe that he shouldn't, but it is up to GM George Paton to decide whether to scrap the Hackett project or to stick by his choice, even though it has been a torrid season for the head coach. The fact remains, if the Broncos can keep their defensive pieces, they have a chance at making the playoffs next season if Wilson and his offensive line are on the same page and if they have a running game. But do you think the Broncos are a year away from making the playoffs? How far do you think they can go next season? Please let us know in the comments below, but before you go, if you still want to watch awesome NFL content like this, go ahead and watch that next video that will pop on your screen.